All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tea with Doug G. If you don't know me, my name is Doug Gooden, and this week, y'all, I'm so excited to welcome my incredible guest, Miss Kathryn Skeean. Kathryn, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on. And yeah, why don't you tell the folks who you are, what you do, all that jazz? The floor is yours.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So my name's Kathryn Skeean, if you haven't seen. I am the co-photo editor of The Red and Black, and I do a lot of coverage when it comes to protests around Athens, anywhere from, again, protests to sports to everything in between. So I know the city backwards and forwards and love it very much and cover it every single day.
Yeah. And I'm very excited to have you on. I think you're one of the first, if not the first, like real journalist who I've had on the show. So I'm very excited to get to kind of pick your brain about some of these questions that we've got. So actually, the first question we have has to do with your love of photography. And it is, I'm sorry, I can't see the user's name right now, but the question is, so where did it all start? This love for photography, where did it start?
Yeah, it started all the way in 7th grade. I took a photo with my iPod Touch and I entered in a competition and I said, oh, I know. I entered in a competition and it won Best in Show. And I was shocked. I was like, with an iPod? And so I continued from there. I took some art classes in school, but I never took any photo-centric classes. It was always just painting and stuff like that, but I kind of took what I could. And in high school, I kind of took yearbook as a joke. I was like, I don't know, yearbook might be interesting, journalism, I don't know. And I ended up loving it. And the first week of my freshman year in college, I walked into the Red and Black and I said, hi, I take photos. I think they're pretty good. Can you teach me how to do the journalism thing? And they said yes. And now I'm the co-photo editor.
Which is awesome. And just, for anyone who's in the Athens area, or even if you're not in the Athens area, go look up the Red and Black online, because the quality of both journalism and of photography is superb. It's incredible. But I love the fact that you start off with, I think that's great that you got into it with a photo you took on an iPod Touch, because that leads beautifully into this question that I have. So, there's constantly this like point that's driven home to people who want to create anything, quality over quantity. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter how much or how fast you can make something. If the quality is not there, it's not worth it. So my question for you is, for anyone who's wanting to kind of get into photography, get into photojournalism, as it were, what would you say are the tools or the equipment that they could get that provides them the best quality photos, the best quality products, without necessarily breaking the bank?
So, I will say, and I'll lead with the fact that I started with an iPod Touch. This is a very cliche answer to that, and I'll give you a little more of an actually solid answer, because as a journalist, I know how awful it is to get a really cliche answer. So it's more your eye. It doesn't completely rely on the camera. Again, I won Best in Show with an iPod Touch. So you can really do it with whatever you have. If you're really looking into going and getting a DSLR, my first was this really junky, used Nikon D40, and that's what I used until I was in college. I believe very heavily in Nikon, and everyone in UGA visual journalism will cringe at that because they're all Canon people.
Yeah.
But I swear Nikon till I die. I currently use a Nikon D500 that will break the bank. It's something I worked for years. But something that's kind of like a mid-level that I really loved to use because I no longer use it. I kind of use it as a backup body now. It's Nikon D5500. It's not going to break the bank. It's good mid-level, will give you quality images. So I definitely recommend that camera. But again, I have to end it with, it's much more your eye and less the camera that's in your hand. You can produce quality images with anything.
So when you talk about having that good eye, what would you say are the key elements to making a good photo. What gets into that eye for people who may be watching who don't know, or for just me who has virtually very little clue?
Well, it's very subjective.
Yeah.
For me, it's definitely the moment. So it's much less, I mean, composition is very important. You should learn composition in order to have a good photo, you know, how you set it up, rule of thirds, things like that, things that you can read in a textbook.
Yeah.
But what makes an impactful image is the moment that you find, like human interaction, what shows the human experience, what they're feeling, you know, and I learned that very hands-on when I was covering protests. You know, the photos that are going to make someone stop and go, wow, are the ones that you can really see the human quality of it. So that a lot of times, that to me is what makes a really good photo. And, you know, there's nature photos and stuff like that that are pretty and things like that. But what speaks to me most is the human quality of a photo.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful answer. And kind of, again, bouncing off to this is it's a great interview when like the conversation just naturally flows to the next question. So we have another question from good old Ben Tankersley. He's in the chat. And he wants to know, what's the coolest thing that you've ever taken a photo of? If you can narrow it down to one, or, you know, I can also give you a top three. Top three is also acceptable.
Well, okay. So I've thought about this. I've gotten this question a million times, and I never give the same answer. Because it's ever changing. But I can tell you that I grew up idolizing an Olympian. He was an equestrian. I grew up riding horses, and I've gotten the opportunity to photograph him while he was in a competition. And I got this like iconic photo of him with this giant grin on his face. And this guy, I mean, he's in his 60s now, but he shaped the sport. And so I captured that photo, and he ended up messaging me and finding me and saying, wow, I loved that photo so much. So that's probably the coolest photo I've ever taken, purely because of like the personal value it has to me. A person who sees it will be like, oh, wow, that's cool. That old guy's on a horse and he's grinning ear to ear. But to me, it means a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really a great story. And that's very cool that happened. So kind of getting into that. So I know that you've said before in our discussion before the show, you know, you are a big sports gal. So for me, every time I've ever seen someone take a picture of any sporting event that's going on, I mean, my hat always goes off to them, because I don't understand how on earth you can take a dozen photos in the span of 3 seconds and just find the one that just hits it the perfect moment. What kind of skill did you have to develop to get to that point? Or like, do you have a technique or like a secret? What's the secret sauce to getting a good action shot?
Yeah, the secret sauce is definitely understanding what you're photographing. So I grew up in sports. I was always playing sports. There was not a sport I didn't play, you know, with the exception of football. But I love sports so much that I know what goes on. I can watch a basketball game and know, okay, I can tell based on his body language is he's passing to this guy, you know, so I can be prepared to capture the photo of him passing the ball to this guy. So, you know, it's just that I have a thorough knowledge of the sport and I can read what's happening. You know, you're not always 100% correct, but you can have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen before it does happen. And that's a lot of times kind of the secret, but it's a lot of practice. You know, you have to be there and photograph it a lot. But also just doing your research on the sport. Yeah.
Yeah. I gotcha. So, so like you said, you know, you're the co-photo editor of the Red and Black, which, you know, is an amazing title and amazing job to hold. But like all photographers, I'm sure you've done your fair share of freelance work. So if you could speak to just you as an artist, as a photographer, what would you say are the big pros and cons of doing freelance work versus doing work for someone like the Red and Black or like a corporate job? I'm not saying that Red and Black is necessarily corporate, but yeah.
where my heart is, but freelancing is definitely good. So you get out of your normal routine. You know, I do a lot of the same things for the Red and Black a lot of times. So it's good to go out and try things you haven't tried or do things that you don't normally do at work. You know, it's just good to freshen your eye and just see things a little bit differently and have different eyes on your work than you usually do at the Red and Black. You know, I have the same people looking at my work all the time, and I get a lot of the same feedback. So I think definitely a great benefit of freelancing is that you have other people looking at your work, and also you have other names seeing your name on that work. So it's really good for networking as well.
Yeah. I gotcha. So kind of going off of that, because, you know, you said like Red and Black, you do a lot of the same work, and, you know, freelancing kind of opens you up to do a lot of different stuff. Well, with this past year, you know, we've seen the entire landscape of just our culture and our world just kind of get shifted on its head. So I think my question to you is, in this day and age where we see so much division, so much polarization, and we see everyone just fighting back and forth, how can the normal everyday citizens, the people who are watching the show, how would you advise them to discern their news? Or like, is there really a place to find this quote unquote unbiased news? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. So I advise people all the time, do your research, know the terms that separate things from opinion, you know, opinion pieces versus what's being presented as real news. That's extremely important because, you know, there's a lot of commentating now, and sometimes they still try to present themselves as journalists, and they're not, you know, they're commentators. But definitely, I think, so something I do personally is I read news from all sides. It's just a personal thing that I do. I suggest that everyone does it because, so you're not, you know, in an echo chamber all the time. And follow people you disagree with, you know. I definitely think that's extremely important. But, you know, lastly, with the exception of the really big name people who you probably will not have time to answer, you know, personally with me, I love when people reach out to me and be like, hey, how did you get this photo? Where'd you get this photo? What's the context of this photo? And I know a lot of our writers are the same way, and a lot of local reporters are really good about that, is if you send us a message and you're like, where did you get that fact? You know, where did this come from? If you present it kindly, you know, and not be like, this is fake news, and you go, hey, where'd you get this fact? I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, we would be delighted to answer your questions. We want people to ask us questions and question us because, you know, we're not perfect. Sometimes we're wrong. So it's just so important to establish that relationship with the people that are covering the community all the time, because then, you know, they're doing the work, you know, and you learn that you can trust them and that they're not out to get you. So I definitely think that's true of pretty much all of the journalists that are reachable. We will answer your questions for sure. And I know personally, I love it. So.
Yeah. So kind of going off of that, because we are such a divisive culture, divided country, I mean, what do you think going forward are going to be the repercussions of this extremely biased, first of all, culture, but also a lot of biased news sources, or quote unquote, you know, you get the quote unquote fake news. What do you see being the repercussions of this for not only news media going forward, but for us as a society, as a culture?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I definitely think it threatens the First Amendment very much so. And not just the freedom of the press, but the freedom of speech. I think it's very dangerous, the direction we're going. And I think that people are going to progressively continue to think that journalists are out to get them, when we're most definitely not. You know, we love the communities we cover. I personally have learned to love Athens so much. You know, I feel like I am family members with the people that are around me, but a lot of them don't feel the same way. Just, you know, I don't think that it helps that there's been lots of messaging that the journalists are like literal messaging saying that journalists are the enemy. because we're not. So I think that if we don't find a way to turn this around, I definitely think that journalism and then the First Amendment in general is definitely threatened. Because without the press, who's there to call out the people that are doing the bad things? So I think it's a really downward spiral that we have to turn around very quickly.
Yeah. Do you have anything that you think might, you being a journalist, I mean, do you have any suggestion for how that might turn around?
Yeah. It's a big question asking what will save journalism. It's a very large question that a lot of people are researching at the moment.
We go for the big stuff here on Tea with Doug G.
For sure. But I think it goes back to what I was saying about reaching out to your journalist and developing that relationship with them, realizing that they're real humans too, not just people behind a screen writing content that are out to get you. If you ask them questions, if you reach out to them and say, hey, how did you get this information? You can develop a trusting relationship because they'll have the answers for you. They'll tell you, this is how I got my information. It's true. Here's the actual source that I used. So I think if people are willing to reach out to us and know that we're not out to get them, I definitely think we can start turning this around. And plus, the community will be stronger for that,
Yeah. This is kind of a small side question, but do you believe that phrase, there's no such thing as bad press, do you think that still holds relevance? Do you think that still is true?
It depends on the context, I think.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I think that heavily depends on context.
That's very fair. I was just, yeah.
No, you're good.
So I know clearly, just hearing you speak on this, I mean, I know that you put so much of yourself into your work, and I get the feeling as someone who does love theater, love art, and works of that nature. So Mr. Tristan Webb, the person who introduced us to each other, he wanted to know what has been the most physically demanding event that you've covered, and then what has been the most emotionally demanding thing that you've covered.
So this summer definitely brought me lots of physically demanding jobs, but there was one in particular, I think it was early June, and I was out covering an Athens anti-discriminatory movement rally, and it was 97 degrees. It was just after the tear gassing incident in Athens, and I was wearing a bulletproof vest, and I was out there from probably 8 a.m. to 2 in the morning, somewhere around there. I almost passed out several times. It was 97 degrees in June in Georgia, and I was wearing a bulletproof vest. So it was definitely, and I'm a small human. I'm 5'1". So that was extremely physically demanding. I had a friend come and bring me electrolyte supplements so I wouldn't pass out. It was a lot. Emotionally demanding was much more recently. Went to the Ana Gabriela Cabrera Memorial. She was the worker at UGA who died of COVID. And so they had a memorial walk for her, and it ended at it was Casa Maria, which is kind of behind the Special Collections Library.
Okay.
Anyway, so they had an altar set up for her. It was near Dia de los Muertos, and so it was in that kind of style of an altar. And I saw her father, who was a grown man, just break down and cry there. And that was just, that was a lot, That was just a lot to handle and see. It made COVID very, very real for me because I saw someone's father, and a girl very young die of that, and so it really woke me up. Not that I wasn't treating COVID seriously already, because believe me, it's terrifying to me. But to know someone in our community and see the face and then see her father break down and cry in front of me that was very emotionally taxing. I went home that night and cried.
Yeah. I would imagine so. So again, going off of that, something that we've talked about a lot on this show is how various groups have sort of adapted to this during COVID, post-COVID landscape. And, hopefully one day post-COVID.
Hopefully.
How do you think that looks? Because I know that we had spoken before the show started about how, the press still has to report things. They still have to go out there, boots on the ground, and cover uh, things. I know that that's taxing on everyone involved. Do you think that we may reach a point where things have to change in terms of the way that things are covered? Or, I mean, have you seen a change in the way that things are covered in this new world that we find ourselves in?
So the boots on the ground aspect is generally just more for our photographers. So definitely myself, I'm definitely always going to be out there. And that's kind of the thing, is photojournalists don't really have that option to Zoom. A lot of our reporters have gotten to do the Zoom option and things like that. And, they're still working their ever loving hearts out.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they do end up going out and going to the protests, but I've had to kind of do a double job of going to protests, asking questions and things like that, and photographing, which I like to do anyway, but doing it more so for stories. I don't see during the pandemic anyway, photojournalists going away. We're a very hardy bunch with a little bit of insanity in us. We kind of run towards the fire.
all the best people have that little drop of insanity in them.
Yeah, we've been trained to run towards the fire instead of away from it. And so I just think that there's no real way to tell people's stories and do them justice without being there with them. You have to go and experience it to really understand what people are feeling. And so I think it's really important that we're still there and we don't stop covering even during COVID, because, we're putting ourselves in that risk, but the stories that we're covering are bigger than ourselves. And that's something I've really taken to heart over this summer is, I've been terrified of COVID, but these stories are very important to tell. And we're going to look back on 2020 one year or one day. And if we didn't, what would we do if we didn't have photos to show? I've gotten some of the most impactful, tear-jerking, make you gasp kind of photos this year. But it's because you have to go out there and experience what they're experiencing with them. And that's just not going to change.
Yeah. And I love the phrasing that you used of how, photojournalists, they're the ones who have to run towards the fire. It's a very awakening truth that I don't think a lot of people understand. But yeah, so kind of getting into I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's so clear like how passionate you are about the work that you do. And more so than that, it's so clear how passionate you are about the community of Athens as a whole. I think that we've seen, especially in our generation, a lot of people who see the quote unquote traditional news cycle and they say something to the effect of like, that doesn't appeal to me, or there's no emotional connection there. So what they do is they turn to sort of alternative forms of news. Your John Olivers, the Daily Shows. What do you think the real appeal of those are? And do you think that they do offer something in the form of giving the news to people?
So I've thought about this, and I think there's great entertainment value in it. And a lot of times when we're covering heavy subjects, it's good to laugh about them. I think there's real value in that. There's definitely, COVID and protests, that's heavy stuff. We've had a really heavy year, so I think it's great to laugh at it. I do not, however, think it's great to get all of your facts from it. I think if you're watching it with knowing that it is satirical and that a lot of the things are made into jokes and things like that, I think it's perfectly fine. If you get your entertainment from it, fantastic. I think that's great, because again, you got to laugh about what's happening sometimes. It's kind of dark humor, which you got to go with it. But when it comes to getting news value out of it, as a journalist, it hurts me a little bit.
Yeah. I think because I asked you that I sent you that question, and I was thinking about it myself, and I was like, I think maybe the best adage that they give, or the best advantage that they give to the people who watch it, is probably this ability to contextualize it for them, or contextualize it in a way that they can understand. Because I mean, I listen to NPR, their morning report every morning, and you pick up about half of it, and then the rest you kind of tune out, if we're being perfectly honest. But yeah. So, Kathryn, it's a very interesting place that we're at right now, because UGA is essentially closing up shop for the semester, and we're gonna hopefully come back very early in January, ready to rock and roll. Yeah, I know I have 2 shows that I'm directing, and
bless you.
Yeah, COVID has made us figure out just how flexible we are.
Very true. Very true.
But yeah. So as we kind of enter this next stage, kind of to wrap up the show and add just a little bit of levity, what do you think are going to be the headlines for these next couple of weeks of holidays? I said levity, and then as soon as I said the question, I was like, I don't think this is gonna add levity.
I wish it would, but if I'm being completely honest, I'm a little scared. Just like everyone else, I want this to be over. I want to be back to normal, and I don't think the next couple months are going to help that, especially with it getting colder, and this is the time of being together with family and traveling across the country or across the world to be with your family. And, I know a lot of people aren't doing that, which is extremely sad, but it's appreciated that they will take that sacrifice. And some people aren't going to do that, and they're going to continue to be with their family. And, I'm not going to express my opinion on that either way, but I definitely think that it's going to be worse before it gets better. And, I thought that was going to be the case in March, just like everyone else. I think they said something like 2 weeks, just lock down for 2 weeks, and then it'll be over. And that obviously is not the case. So I definitely think it's going to get worse than it already is before it gets better again. But we'll just have to see.
Yeah. It's certainly, I hate this feeling that COVID has created, where it's just like, well, we've seen how bad it can get, and there's that little voice in the back of your head that's like, oh, but it could get worse. And I genuinely do try to bring some joy with this show, but we're here at this kind of milestone moment, and I'm like, I'm freaking out here. But yeah. Well, Kathryn, I don't want to end the show on a low note, so let me kind of ask you a high note, or kind of wrap things up on a high note with a little bit of levity, unlike that last question that I just asked. So, Kathryn, you've been taking photos for quite some time now. You've been a photojournalist for, again, quite some time now. It's fun doing this show because I find out what phrases I say way too much. Need to diversify the vocabulary just a little bit. So, Kathryn, do you have any great stories of photojournalism fails for the folks watching?
You caught me off guard on that one. I think if I could have thought about that for a little longer, I would have something like great content for you.
Yeah.
I have broken both of my lenses in one go. So that's good. Like both my nice lenses. Don't know how it happened. I just opened my bag and they were broken, and I had to like piece together my lenses and hold them up against the camera body for the glass to be in the right position. So that was good. I don't have any like super embarrassing. I wish I did. I expose myself.
So you've never been at like an equestrian event and gotten the perfect shot of a horse bucking a rider off?
You know what? That actually. So I have spooked a horse with my camera, and someone has fallen off as a result of that. So I guess that definitely qualifies. I'm sorry, don't know who the rider was. Sorry, I was reading Ben's.
No, don't worry. I'll throw it up on screen. So Ben says that the first photojournalism assignment he ever went on for a class made it all the way there and realized that he forgot his battery.
Classic.
Yeah. You know, that's happened to me on the show. I've gotten halfway through an interview and my computer has died. Yeah, you know, keeps things flexible.
Also, thank you to Heidi Gooden for saying you the red and black. We love readers. So thank you so much. We appreciate that so much.
We love to see Heidi Gooden, who I think has been out commented today by Mr. Tankersley.
Sure has.
Which is no small feat. But yeah, well, Kathryn, seriously, thank you so much for being on. I had a great time. I think we covered a lot of great topics. Did you have a good time?
I had a fantastic time. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, wonderful. Special thanks to Tristan Webb for connecting the two of us, getting us in contact with each other. But yeah, Kathryn, as we enter this next little stage, I know that while some people go home or some people may be in Athens, I know that you're probably still going to stay incredibly busy because it still is election season in Georgia, which is
it is. Has not ended. I actually, if I am traveling to Boston, my flight is on January 5th to come back. If I do end up traveling, I don't know yet. But I will be getting off the plane, driving back to Athens, and then covering election stuff. So
that sounds about right. But yes, do hope that you stay safe. Hope that you get some amazing work done, which I'm sure you will. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching. As always, keep an eye out for what Viter Media has going on. We have new episodes of Setting the Skeen every Wednesday. And yeah, until next week, I'm Doug Gooden. She's Kathryn. Words just got messed up in my mouth. I'm Doug Gooden. She's Kathryn Skeean. And this has been The Tea. Y'all have a great night.